Hey, it was in April 10th, April 2010, when there was a man named Hugo. Everybody say, Hugo. I think that's a good name. If you're looking for, hey, if you're having a baby, get ready. Hugo, I think, is the name for your child because it's just fun to say. Well, anyway, there's a man named Hugo, and there was a woman that was being attacked by another man, and Hugo, even though he was a homeless man, he decided that he wasn't going to let that happen. He was going to step in and defend this lady. And what happened after that was kind of crazy. In fact, this guy not only turned on Hugo, but he actually began to stab him over and over and over again until he left them there bleeding and getting ready to die. In fact, Hugo collapsed on the sidewalk, and later on, he actually eventually did die, saving this woman's life. The reason is Hugo did not succumb. He was not a victim to the bystander effect. And what's very interesting about this story about Hugo is that actually later on they're looking at the footage of video surveillance from that area, and it was revealed of this. More than 20 people actually walked by Hugo as he's laying there bleeding. Some even came over and actually stopped to look at him. One guy actually even knelt down and took a picture of Hugo bleeding to death. But no one actually helped. No one even picked up their phone and called 911. Now, that's a tragedy that Hugo was actually stabbed to death, but I think the greater tragedy of the story is this. So many people saw the need and did nothing. That is the bystander effect. That's what we've been talking about the last few weeks, is that when there are more and more people, they can see a problem, but they assume somebody else is going to do something about it, and so they do nothing, assuming that someone else is going to actually step up to the plate and act. It's an interesting story there, but Jesus actually told a story over 2,000 years ago that actually mirrors this same reality. It's found in Luke chapter 10, if you want to turn there with me, or it'll be on the screen. Most of us probably already know this, or at least know the principle of this story that Jesus is getting ready to tell us, but it's the exact same mirror of the reality of this bystander effect taking place. It says in Luke chapter 10, beginning with verse 30, that a Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and they left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when they saw the man lying there, he actually crossed over to the other side of the road and passed him by. It goes on to say that a temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but yet he did nothing. He also passed by on the other side of the road. So it's the same picture. You've got this victim. He's a Jewish guy. He's stripped of everything. He's half dead. They've robbed him. They've stripped him naked. They've beaten him, and they've left him helpless. I mean, he can't walk. He can't fight back. He cannot save himself. And these guys walk on by. Now, the interesting thing about that ancient world is it wasn't just that the guy was naked. Actually, clothes signified kind of who you are, your class, in whether you were rich or whether you were poor, whether you were a Jew, whether you were a Gentile, whether you were a priest or a common person. You were able to tell a lot of that by the clothes that people wore. And so they didn't just strip him and rob him of his possessions. They actually stripped him of his dignity and his identity, leaving him on the brink of death, barely alive, with no strength to help himself. See, the same thing happened in Hugo and in this story right here. They see the need and they do nothing. Think about that for a moment. A priest who is supposed to be there to help God's people, he won't even give it the time of day. In fact, they say that because of religious rituals and things like that, if he was to touch a dead person, he would be defiled and he would have to go through all these other rituals to get back to the purification process. But I don't really think that that's what this guy was worried about. I really think he was probably worried about all the extra things he was going to have to do, the time it was going to take. See, it's interesting to me that sometimes we will rather look religious than actually do what we're called to do. And that is to help and serve other people. Same with the temple priest. He was kind of in the same situation. He actually comes over to the man. He can see that he's not quite dead. And so really, he had no reason to walk away because he wouldn't have been defiled because the man was actually still living and he could have done something. But these two men don't do anything because they become a victim of the bystander effect. Seeing the need is not enough. Turn to someone and say, it's not enough. Listen, we cannot be aware of the need. That does nothing. Awareness doesn't change anything. But action does. Doing something about this situation. And here's the reason, here's the thing that they should have done. They should have went and helped this guy. They should have had a place in their heart where this guy is half dead. We need to go serve him. We need to go help him. We need to figure out what to do. We need to have compassion on this gentleman here. But instead, listen, the very ones called to serve walked by in silence because they had succumbed to the bystander effect. But how many know that that's not the end of the story? Isn't it good that that is not the end of the story? Then comes along another man that actually stepped into the situation. Read it with me. Verse 33, it says this. Then a despised Samaritan came along. And when he saw the man, what did he do? He felt compassion for him. He felt compassion for him. It wasn't that he was just feeling sorry for the guy. You ever done that? Feel sorry for someone and do nothing? Guilty. That's not really compassion. But rather, it's actually doing something about the situation. It's interesting to me, this story, this unlikely despised Samaritan, this unlikely hero of the story comes onto the scene because if you know some of the history there, the Jews and the Samaritans, they did not like each other. In fact, Jews would go all the way around the area of Samaria just so they didn't have to encounter these people. That's what they felt about them. I think Jesus is driving home a point here when he says all of a sudden to a Jewish crowd that is looking and they've asked this question, who is my neighbor? And Jesus goes into this story and the unlikely hero is a person that they can't stand. And this despised man, rather than walking by like two people from the church did, becomes the hero of the story. We could put it in terms for us to understand, since we don't have a temple, but we do have a church building, if you will. It'd be like the equivalent of the pastor walks by and does nothing. And then let's say the worship leader comes on over and he looks at the guy, but he decides, that's a little bit more than I want to get into today. And he walks on by to the other side. And the guy that isn't even a part of the church is the guy that actually goes over and does something. And check out what he does. Luke, he doesn't just go over and, well, they probably didn't have phones there. He probably didn't get his iPhone and call 911 like he's on a pretty abandoned road here. But listen to what it says, verse 34. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn. How many know that just if he would have just bandaged the guy up and left him there, he had already done more? No one would have faulted him for saying, all right, I've bandaged you up. You ought to be good from here. See you on later, because I'm traveling down this road as well. No, rather, he takes him, he puts him on the donkey and takes him to the inn where he takes care of him. And then the next day, that should have been enough, but no, he wants it to go even further. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. And if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here. It's interesting that this man, this despised man, was willing to not just go over and take a look, not just go over and take a picture, but he actually begins to help this gentleman out. Listen, it cost him some things. It cost him convenience. It cost him time. It cost him supplies. It cost him money. But he was willing to pay the price of the cost to serve this guy no matter what. And I think why he was willing to serve rather than the other two is what the message says. If you read this in the message, it says that the Samaritan, his heart went out to him. His heart went out to him. Here's the bottom line in this idea of the bystander effect and the idea of serving in the church and serving outside the church. In fact, I think the idea really about serving in general all comes down to the condition of our heart. And the priest and the temple assistant, or in other translations say the Levite, they didn't have an eyesight problem. How many know that we probably don't have eyesight problems? We see needs all over the place. We see needs in the church. We see needs outside the church. They didn't have an eyesight problem. These two men had a heart problem. And so for us today, just a simple question that we should ask ourselves, especially if we're not serving: what is the condition of our heart? Let me give you just a couple questions to ask yourself for a heart test. Because, see, this parable isn't just about them. This parable really mirrors for us what Jesus is wanting from us towards other people. In other words, I could ask myself, do I see people as inconveniences, or do I see people as opportunities to serve? Or rather, do I, like we talked about last week, do I rather stay in comfort, or do I want to extend compassion on those that need it. The difference, again, is not what they saw. It's in how their hearts actually responded to the situation. Think about it for a minute this way. Let's say there was a lost person to come to church, and they're in the same condition spiritually speaking. Like, they're lost. They've got wounds. They've been wounded by the sins of their own selves. They've been wounded probably by the sins of others. They have been stripped of the true identity of a child of God because they're far from God. They're powerless to save themselves. Ephesians 2:1 would say it this way, as for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins. So just as this guy is beaten, man, their only hope, listen, the world's only hope is someone else's mercy. A lost person needs people like you and I to show them Christ's mercy. Because isn't that what he did for us? Think about it for a moment. Here's God looking out on humanity. Think it this way. What if he would have just saw that we were in our sin condition? And that's as far as it went. He saw us, and he didn't just see us and leave us there. No, rather he had compassion on us enough to come down in the form of flesh in the name of Jesus Christ, live a sinless life, die on a cross for you and I, for a death that we deserved. It rose from the grave 3 days later so that we could be saved, freed, restored, and fulfilled to the purposes of God. And in the same way, we're to serve and show that mercy to other people. There was a teacher, her name was Linda. And Linda was like probably a lot of us. The story goes that she sat year after year after year in church very quietly. They say she loved God, but every Sunday she kind of slipped in and then she kind of slipped out. Never getting involved at all. In fact, they say that she thought that she didn't have much to offer, that she wasn't really qualified. And then they said this, and this is what reminded me of the bystander effect. She had this thought, someone else will do it. Well, one Sunday, she's sitting there, and actually the ministry of the children's director came up and asked her if she would consider helping out in a kids' class. Linda hesitated. She said to herself, I'm not really a teacher. I don't really have any training. And she finally said truthfully, I am terrified. Now think about it for a moment. 2-year-olds terrifying adults. But finally, Linda says yes. They say the first week that she just sat back in the back observing. Then the second week, she decided that she would help with the craft. By the third week, a little girl named Emily ran up to her, hugged her, and said, I'm so glad you're here. I don't have a mom at home. A mom that doesn't help me with any of this kind of stuff. And she said to Linda, you're like my mom on Sundays. And those words broke Linda. She realized that small step of acting, of changing a young girl's life. And over the years, listen, Linda became a mentor to dozens and dozens of kids. Some grew up to follow Jesus Christ. Some even went into what we would call full-time ministry. And so many people pointed back to the influence that Linda made in her life. And one day, someone asked Linda why she started serving. This is what she said. I just got tired of sitting in the chair watching life go by. I didn't want to be a bystander anymore. That's the power of one person, just like the Good Samaritan, not walking by. One yes didn't just change a life, but listen, it was changing generations. Can I say, church, this is our chance. The needs are right in front of us. The needs of people serving in kids, the needs of people serving for worship, the needs for people to serve and mentor and disciple other people, the need for people to be involved in connections and follow-up and all the different things that we're trying to do on a Sunday morning to show people the love and mercy of Christ. And listen, one yes can change someone for eternity. The question is, will we say yes? And the way you can say yes is to simply fill out this card or scan the QR code that Philip's going to throw on the screen that says, I would like to get involved. I would like to do my part. Rather than just coming in and sitting on a Sunday morning, I want to do my part. Here's what I think was the difference between the heart condition of the Samaritan and the priest and the Levite. The priest and the Levite were asking the question, how will this affect me? And the Samaritan was asking the question, how is this going to affect that person if I don't do something? Same with us. We can come to church and we can say to ourselves as we're even on the way there, what am I going to get from church today? In fact, I think, as I've said before, many of us in the Western culture and in the Western world and in the Western church, we have been programmed to come, to sit, to consume, and there is not much other than that. And as far as I know, there are so many scriptures that just don't leave room for that. Serve one another, love one another, forgive one another. Consider others better than yourself. Be like Christ. You want to be the best in the kingdom? Serve in the kingdom. Listen, this thing about church is not just about going to church. It truly is about being the church. And we be by doing and serving out of the condition of where our heart is. So I ask one last time, for this week anyway, what are we going to do? We're going to walk on by. We're going to be like the people that walked by Hugo. We're going to be the people that are like the priest and the Levite, the church people that just go, somebody will figure it out. Somebody will do it. Somebody will take care of those kids down there. Somebody will lead worship. I was telling the people in our table talk group last week that I really wanted to start out this series by no one being here before you got here. In other words, you came in, there's no one ready to do worship. There's nobody in the back getting ready to put words on the screen for us. There's nobody at the doors greeting people. There's no teachers downstairs, so you got to sit with your kids. And then at 9:30, nothing happens. And then maybe 10 to 15 minutes later, if y'all are still here, the ones that are serving actually come in and begin the service. But then I thought, well, what would that look like to someone that is not a part of our church? And so I came back to my senses. And then I thought about, well, hey, maybe I think I told this to Bill in my group as well. What would happen if I'm in the middle of preaching and I said, sorry, just a moment, I've got to go downstairs and change a kid's diaper. Wait a minute. Hold on. Before we get to the next point, let me run back to the screen and put it up there for you. It's a good thing we got people back there. But we need more. It's a good thing we got some people downstairs. But guess what? Because lack of, some of our people from media are actually downstairs taking care of kids. Here's the thing. I really believe, and what spurred this on, I was going to preach a different message. I'll probably preach it next week. But what spurred me on to come to this conclusion is really something what Bill said in that table talk. Serving comes down to the condition of the heart. And that's one thing I can't change for you. That's one thing that you and God are going to have to get on the same page with, because I promise you, God is in the God of serving. Serving other people, serving us, all so that God can be glorified above all things. Amen.